My grandmother was the boss of the family. For all family members. She was it. When Grandma spoke, the family listened. Grandma, Minnie, joined her. I became her favorite grandson. My grandmother, when I got 13, she says, Naurbon, I want you to start milking with Neva and Elva. That was my two old maid aunts' name. And that meant 4 o'clock every morning, out of bed, walk 1/4 mile, my house to hers, milk 4 or 5 cows. God, my knuckles still hurt. Too many tits. And if you've never milked a cow, I think you should try someday. That's a lot of tit pulling on that. Excuse my language, but I guess gotta put that on tape. My sister was named Oralea, O-R-A-L-E-A. And my brother was named Alfred DeWitt Perry, but we never called him by his name. My mother said A.D., and that's what we called him. And he died with that name. A.D., using that name, A.D., Alfred DeWitt. I was the oldest. Yeah.
So
I'm still the oldest. I'm the only one left of the 3. And so, my dad, not having been able to go to school to be a minister, says, Naurbon, you must attend higher education. I don't have any money. Well, you got to work for it. You got to do something. So anyway, he persuaded a few people to make it possible for me to get free education at the first university built in Hammond, Louisiana, Southeastern Louisiana University. So I went for free. I had to ride my horse many times to catch a neighbor who took me to college, but that's what happened. That's the way I started my life at 16 years of age. First year of college.
what did you go to school for?
I went to school to learn how to be an accountant. War came along while I was still there. I got drafted. World War II. So I spent almost 3 years in World War II.
The Navy, or sorry, the Air Force?
U.S. Air Force. Tech Sergeant. That's 5 stripes. I was an enlisted guy. I spent 1.5 years on the list trying to be a pilot. and my class never made it before they offered me to go to school to be a flight engineer on a B-17. And I decided, well, I looked like I was never going to get to be a pilot, but I wanted to fly. And so I took the volunteer, went to school, and they sent me to school to learn how to be a flight engineer on a B-17. First ones ever fly and built and flew in World War II. And when we got our plane, everybody decided that, you know, the whole base, we got our planes assigned to us, and everybody wanted to put something to show what their plane should fly, what it should have on its fuselage, you know. And so it just so happened that at the time we got our plane, we were in Lincoln, Nebraska, and during that time, they had these shows coming around, you know, for us service people. And Betty Grable and her husband was in the show. Frank Sinatra was there at the time. But anyway, our crew got together, and Betty Grable put on quite a show for us that day. And we all went back together, and the 10 of us got together. What are we going to paint on our plane? What are we going to put on it? Indicate what we wanted on it. So the vote came down what to put on it. We're going to put Betty Grable on it. We wanted to put her nude, of course, but not allowed. But anyway, there was a German POW on the base at the time, and he was a painter, professional painter. And so we got him to paint for us. So on the left side, the fuselage, right below the captain's window, Betty's legs, we put her legs and her thigh on that airplane. It looked pretty good. Heavens above. And we painted that, we flew with that. We lost that plane, crash landed it, but with that still on there when it left. But anyway, heavens above. Betty looked pretty good. Wherever we were flying, sometime we'd have enemy planes come by, and we didn't shoot them down because they seemed to be friendly, and we left them alone. We didn't shoot until we were shot at, was our practice. Let them shoot first. If they shoot, we'll shoot back. If they don't shoot, we won't shoot. That was what the crew decided. It's not what the Air Force wanted done. But our crew decided that amongst ourselves, 10 members. And that saved our life more than once. The first time I was injured in World War II, we were flying pretty low in Germany, and we ran across a lot of flak. One day we were running into some fighters. Our people covering us to protect us the Americans were that day was the black Americans that in World War II became very famous for what they did as fighter planes. The black ones. And we had to get down so low that we didn't know what was going to happen. We were getting that low, trying to get back to England at that point in time, but the flak was covering us. Anytime we go over a bridge or something, flak was coming. So I was standing on my flak suit, and all of a sudden my butt started burning. I'd been hit with flak from the bottom, come up through my flak suit, red hot flak come up, caught me in the butt. And I got a nice little scar. I won't show you, but a little scar from it. About that big. But anyway, we lost 2 other guys on the plane that day out of the 6 that were flying. And besides the tail gunner, a waist gunner, and one of the officers was killed. Navigator was killed. But during that time, we crashed because we couldn't get back to England. So we crash landed in a beet field. And we were in another country at that time, Belgium, trying to get back to England. So when we crashed in the beet field, we were close to a hedge. Over there in the country, in those countries, they planted hedges and used them as fences around the property. Farmers did. High hedge, 5 and 6 feet hedge, very thick hedge. And so that was the fence line instead of the fence that used that. Fortunately for us, we were in the French part of the country at the time, and Belgium. And so, but we landed in a beet field in Belgium, and about 50 yards away was one of these big hedges. The other side was the French. The French was our partners at that time. And the crew members are French people, soldiers, picked us up and salvaged us and got us into their country right quick. And so here I am today.
Did you get a Purple Heart for?
No. Never got it.
Oh.
I tried. I never did get it. They lost after World War II, right after World War II, the part of the records that were coming from overseas back to this country, a part of the records for half of the whole air base that I was in were never found, and still aren't to this day. The only reason I got my awards and things was from doctor testimony that I was able to get from doctors and said, yeah, Naurbon was injured and so forth. Mm-hmm. And I got some awards, but they didn't give too many awards out until after you were out of service. And by the time that happened, they couldn't find you, or they lost them, or they had some excuse. Yes, I got some awards, but never a Purple Heart. But I never could get the service to agree that I should get a Purple Heart for my butt. During the war in France, while we were stationed in France, or close by, but particularly in France, American silk stockings were like gold in your pocket. French girls would do whatever was necessary to get a pair of silk stockings. Take you home, meet the family, whatever. That's my only story about that. I also worked part-time for a law firm, helping extra. And the law firm seemed to like me pretty well. So one day, one of the lawyers said to me, he said, "Perry, they're just now starting to rehire in the government now. You're an accountant. They're starting to hire accountants, the U.S. government is, Internal Revenue Service. They're looking for them. Why don't you go down and put your application in?" I did. They hired me that day, and I retired from the Internal Revenue Service. But I won't go after you now. I would have when I was in service if you'd have committed a crime. I was a criminal investigator for the Internal Revenue Service for 25 years. I'll tell you about one of the cases, and that's all.
Okay.
There was a mafia family, and I won't even tell you where they lived or what state. But there was a mafia family, and I knew them, not personally, but knew of the family, long before I went to work for the Internal Revenue Service. But anyway, after I went to work for the Internal Revenue Service, I finally reached a position that put me up to be a supervisor. And so, but just before I became the supervisor, I was assigned to go see this person about an Internal Revenue matter. And I went to his house and got to his house. He had a big house. So he had two big Dobermans about this high, at least 2.5. Biggest Dobermans I've ever seen before or since. And they were not going to allow me inside that fence to the house. So anyway, after a while, the guy came out and he said, "What do you want, boy?" I said, "Sir, my name is so-and-so. Here's my credentials. I'm a special agent with the Internal Revenue Service," and he cursed me and said, "Get the hell off my property or I'm gonna turn my dogs loose." And I said, "Sir, I'm a federal agent." He told me what he thought about me and cursed and said, "Get the hell off my property." I said, "Sir, I want you to read what my credentials says." You can take your credentials and what to do with them and go back and tell your boss. And if you mess around here, says, you know, first thing you know, he may find you in the river. So I went back to my boss, told him what happened. So he got some agents together. We went back to see the guy, and he apologized profusely. And my boss told him what the law could provide for him. He apologized a little more. Apologized to me again. And so we left. And I'm here today. I didn't get thrown in the river. But he ultimately went to jail later on. Compliments of the Internal Revenue Service.
So tell me about Jim and Brian. What were they like as kids?
Jim was a big boy. Grew up to be a big boy. He was friendly. Brian's demeanor is entirely different than Jim's. I don't know why, but very loving person. And so, is. And but he's not one to visit too much. Just his nature, just his way. But he's a pilot, and I think that's the problem. Pilots, as I learned in World War II, are very demanding people. Just do my way or no way. And that's their attitude that they develop as they got their positions. Brian was 5 years old when he decided he wanted to be a pilot. He had bought one of those little paper airplanes that you fly way back, and he was 5 years old. But he heard a few stories, you know, about his dad in the war, and planes and flying. But the last pilot I had in the Air Force became a very good friend of mine. uh, when we got all doing it, every year we'd go back to conventions and things. And he visited 2 or 3 times, and Brian would hear us talking about flying and all that stuff. And so he would try to get him to talk some, and he learned that he was a pilot. And so Brian wanted to be a pilot. He's now chief pilot for United Airlines on that big 888 plane. Jim works for the Navy right now. He's a contract manager for their very highest secret weapons made now. I see Jim has 2 boys, and Brian has a girl, Alexis. And Jim's 2 boys have 2 grandsons and 1 great-granddaughter, and another one gonna be here in May. Not very productive, but adequate. I'd like my family to remember that family should be close-knit, enjoyable, friendly, talkative, communicative with each other, and above all else, there must be honesty. Nothing else matters to me but the integrity of being an honest family member. I haven't had much religion until the last 8 months. And Yvonne, my caregiver now, who's, in my opinion, very religious and instrument in passing it around a little bit, passed it on to me. And so I now am getting back into going to church. That was not just my dad. That goes back to the family in Mississippi and from wherever else they came from, England and so forth. Religion seemed to be a big, important thing to them. But Naurbon never could buy it, to the extent that they wanted him to buy it. But you know what? If I can believe now and make it to wherever you go to heaven, that's what I want to do. I'm trying to. So, to my family, unto thyself be true.
What was your wife's name?
Mildred Louise Dix, D-I-X. So I met a blonde in Danville, Virginia. Got acquainted, dated, and one weekend, Blonde suggested, well, how about I got a girlfriend and her boyfriend, they'd love to join us some weekend, double date. You interested? Why not? Jitterbugging was the dance of the age that time. Jitterbugging. If you've never done it, you should try it. Anyhow, after about 4 or 5 weekends, we're double dated. I'd gotten where I liked dancing with Louise. I never did call her Mildred. She didn't like the name. Didn't even want to write it down. Louise, so I asked her, I whispered in her ear while we were doing a pretty good and hot dance, and I said, how about a date sometime? She said, are you crazy? My family wouldn't allow that. Okay. A few dates later, I said, do you ever think about that question I asked you? She said, what question are you talking about? I said, asking for a date. She said, yeah, I thought about it. My dad would kill you if he came up there asking for a date. I said, why would he do that? He said, well, you just don't do things like that. You know? Your girlfriend's my girlfriend. And my dad, and beside that, my boyfriend wouldn't like that. Okay. So 3 dates later, we were dancing along, having a real hot time. I'd had about 2 beers. She didn't drink. So I said, you ever thought about that date I asked you for? She said, yeah, I've thought about it. I said, well, anyway. She agreed one time. 3 months later, we got married. Married 68 years before she died. End of story. Louise learned how to do flower arranging and but for whatever reason, she always liked Japanese and Chinese things. So whatever you see that looks like it may have a string attached, she got it. But I got one thing in the other room in there, a big old elephant strung on the wall. I got an elephant hanging on the wall.
Did you guys have a special song together?